YouTube, I'm Aaron from Lone Star Drift, and this is...
Dave Egan.
Dave Egan. He is from...
Ireland.
And where would everybody know you from? Your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel, Drift Games, and maybe commentator and vice president of Drift Masters.
Okay. How much time do you spend at Drift Masters versus, like, Drift Games?
I spend about, I would say, a third of my year with Drift Masters and 2/3 with Drift Games, because it's quite seasonal. We only run the championship from, say, April to September, so I'm pretty heavy on it there, and then in the off-season we do a lot more with Drift Games, so it's kind of like jumping between the two.
If you don't know what Drift Masters is, guys, you should really go look it up. Drift Masters is incredibly well produced right now. They have some of the best drivers in the world, incredible talent. They have very visually striking. I haven't been to one of the events yet, but it's extremely visually striking to see on the live stream. Extremely well put together, unless I'm watching the wrong thing and thinking it's Drift Masters.
We try and push the boat out.
All over James Dean's car. He is actually side by side, front wheel to front wheel. He's pushing Dean around the track, and the transition is insane. The transition doesn't even make sense. How did he get away with that? And he's still in it. Burkowski dives onto Dean's door again. Here we go again. He is hungry for it. This kid wants his name on everyone's lips tonight. And by midnight, he might just be that rising star. As he all over the back of James Dean's car, he's right there. He's closer than he was the first time. He's more aggressive than he was the first time. And now he's right with Dean. He lost him here the last time. Not this time. James cannot get away. And Burkowski goes right to the door. Does he make a big impact with the wall? How does he hold it?
We've done events in stadiums where we've laid entire tarmac on a football stadium. We've done crazy street events. We've done trying to push the boat out as far as possible, and we have a great partnership from the production side with Red Bull Media House. So they bring all their expertise, live telemetry, race drones, you name it. I think we have. We started 5 years ago. I think we had 8 cameras, and last year we had 48 cameras on one. So it's very intense.
Is there a camera operator for every camera?
It's insane. Like, there's so many cameras, slow-mo cameras, like phantom cameras, then normal cameras, there's 3-4 drone guys. It's just, and then we have telemetry. I think there's 150 sensors on the track put in, so all the telemetry from the cars is recorded live, and it's judges aiding the judges, just kind of putting as much as we can into it to make it as good as it can be. Sort of like we always said, drifting in Europe has existed for 15 years, but if we put the best people from every single championship and put them all together, all the drivers together, put the production level on top of it, can we make it something? And it's been really successful for us. Well, up until the pandemic, and then we're having to kick back in again, but it's been crazy. We're putting 10, 20,000 people in every event, and it's intense. And some amazing drivers from all over Europe. I think we have 45 nationalities competing, so it's
holy cow. This is all too confusing for me, and I have a million questions, such as, why would you turn a stadium into a drift track and go like y'all lay plywood down and then asphalt on top of it, I've seen, and do all this stuff? Is it just because it's more expensive to bring in bleachers?
No, it's
than the track.
It's like, actually a lot of the reason is that in Europe, when you have a racetrack, it's in a very isolated area because of noise. So it's way, way, way out in the middle of 2-3 hours away from everything. But if you bring the race or the drift into the middle of the city, you can fill that stadium because you're bringing it to the people. So it is incredibly expensive, and it's incredible to watch people lay asphalt or tarmac for 4 days and then tear it all back up again on like 3 days later.
As an outsider, I have this, just one question leads to the next. Like, I don't understand the finances of this whole thing. I don't know if you want to tell us how some of this stuff works, but like, is it actually financially feasible to host some of the Drift Masters events? Because if you're telling me there's 48 camera operators, how many people are on the production side just hosting the event? From
80 or 85 people, I would say.
People taking tickets, people parking cars in the parking lot, people
how it works,
judging people.
It's quite simple. So basically, Red Bull Media House bring the production level to the event, so they cover the cost of that production, but then they own the rights to that televised all over the world. So that's their little deal. They use it as a marketing tool, and then from that particular perspective, Drift Masters themselves work with the local promoter. They actually pay Drift Masters to come as an act, and then they cover the cost of the setup of the event and all those things and sell the tickets. And then Drift Masters as an entity is sponsored by really, really big companies like Red Bull and Link ECU and ST Suspension and all these guys. So there's a lot going on, and merchandising and everything thrown in on top. Is it financially viable? Sometimes events will lose and then others will win, so it's kind of a balance across. But we're still here, so it's a good sign.
Can you explain that one more time again, like I'm 5? Say it again. Red Bull pays for the production. and then they deal with all that. And then there's an event promoter.
The local promoter.
The local promoter.
He will pay Driftmasters to come to that area as an attraction.
Is that promoter associated with drifting, or is it just like a ticket sales place?
No, a drift promoter who would generally be so for example, when Driftmasters comes to Ireland, I'm the promoter. So I will rent the track, do all the financials, pay a fee to Driftmasters, and say, right, we're bringing the attraction just like a concert, and then you bring them, and then you sell the tickets around that and try and make your money on top of that. So, and a cut will go back to Driftmasters, and like the sponsors will come in to cover the whole thing. At least it's a 350Z, so it's not too loud.
Yeah. Don't breathe.
This wouldn't be normal, but this is quite normal for what we do.
Yeah, I know. I just don't want to get hit by something. Oh, as I said that, did you just feel that?
That was a rock.
Yeah. Don't breathe. All right, we got a clean spot coming. Clean air for a second. Okay.
That's like the most expensive dry ice machine I've ever had in an interview. So yeah, that's kind of what Driftmasters is. Obviously, there's driver entries on top. It's a complicated system. It's a very professional setup. It's a lot of different organizations that have come together. It's run from Poland. That's where it's owned. And then we work on I'm vice president, so I work on sort of the media side of things and sponsorship side of things. So, you know, making sure I come from a consultancy point of view, because I've run a lot of championships in the past, that everything runs smoothly, and sort of work on our relationship with our media team. So Drift Games, as a media team, works for Driftmasters, which is confusing. And we also work with Red Bull. So there's a lot of crossing over everything. But in reality, it's just a bunch of people coming together to try and make the best championship Europe has ever seen, which I think we've done pretty okay, and we were on really good momentum until the pandemic. So I'm happy that we've got to the point where we're looking forward to a new season.
Turn off your car. All right. Sorry, keep going.
That's from the burnout.
Yeah.
So this is, we came here I missed the start of Drift Week. Unfortunately, the day before I was flying, tested positive for COVID, which was really a bummer after waiting so many months to come. And it was 22 months of a travel ban from Europe to US. So 3 days before Drift Week, they opened that travel ban. So we were like, it was the luckiest thing in the world. And then it wasn't. So I sent Adam in my place and Josh, and they came and had an absolute blast while I sat at home being very depressed about the whole situation, watching all the content. And then I went and we had another event in Ireland on Saturday. 150 drivers. I did half of the event, drove at the event, came straight to the party at the event, straight to the airport, landed in LAX. The boys picked me up in the M3, drove straight to the track, straight onto the track, did 2.5 hours drifting, and then was here today. So I got just the tail end of things. So I'm still.
You just got a teeny tiny taste.
But I still got something, which I'm really happy about, because it's nice to meet everybody in person and have a conversation.
Would it be possible for me to throw a Drift Week in Europe, do you think?
No.
That's what everybody says.
Not a hope.
Really? Why not? What are the logistical problems?
The logistical aren't the problems. The problems are that Europe doesn't like cars anymore. Their big MO is get rid of all the petrol, get rid of all the diesel, everybody on electric, everybody on a hybrid. So they try and make it so difficult to have a modified car or a drift car. Like the cars that we've seen on this trip wouldn't make it 30 seconds down the road in Ireland before they're in a compound with the police, job done. Like you can't have a roll cage in the car, you can't have your wheels outside the arches, you can't have most of the stuff that you'll see here. So yes, you could do it, but you'd have to do it on van and trailer. There's no way you could have the cars on the road. Like they just wouldn't happen. Plus, accessibility to the tracks is also a lot more limited than it would be here. Here you can kind of go to a track on a Tuesday and say, I want to go drifting. That's not as easy in Europe. Those tracks are very busy with regular commercial work, and drifting is kind of not the most profitable thing for a track, so there's not as much of it. I think it's possible with a van and trailer. I like the idea of it, but you've got to cross many seas, and you've got to cross it, and the customs and everything, like between different countries. So you're so lucky that you guys have one country that's so vast and big that it almost is like you're traveling across a continent. But for us, it's like border, so it's a little bit more difficult.
Is there kind of any type of weirdness looking at Drift Week from a European country? Like, what are they doing? Like, is it crazy, or are you just like those stupid Americans are always doing something like that?
No, I think it's admirable, because it's what we would love to do if we weren't so controlled by governmental, like in Ireland, for example, just to have a drift car. Yes, you can go drifting, but that happens once every 2 or 3 months. But to have one on the road, the tax is incredible, the fuel is incredibly high, the insurance is incredibly high. We have a national test that you have to bring the car into every year. So you almost have to strip the car back to standard and then go through the test and put it all back.
Thank you very much. Do you notice he slammed the barriers?
Yeah, and he's like, oh no. He's got to drive that home too, so it doesn't sound too healthy.
Yeah. So you couldn't drive that car on the roads?
You could, but you wouldn't get very far. Yeah, it's just not as accessible. We have a hugely passionate car culture, but they have to. It's such a commitment to even just have one on the road. You know, that's the problem with most European countries.
So you definitely couldn't drive any of your pro cars around. They're just absolute trailer queens.
No, absolute trailer queens. Like, not even what I think about it. UK is probably the only place in Europe that you could. They're a little bit more lenient there. You can kind of drive them on the road once they have somewhat legal stuff happening, but like Germany, France, Holland, like there is no drifting in Holland unless the track is wet and they do it once a month. There's no championship, no nothing. It's just completely outlawed. Ireland we run a lot of our drift games, bashes and days like that, but yeah, it's a lot more, like to see the stuff we see here, you would not see it in Europe. It's like insane to us. Like even driving that M3 that the guys were in, which is totally stock car, is still insane to them. You can drive around with your door all, you know, pushed in and bumper falling off. Like that just wouldn't be the case in Ireland. So unfortunately, it's sort of tough going for us because it's all this, you know, global warming stuff and everyone's trying to be eco-friendly, and it's kind of killing our car culture a little bit. So we like coming over here remembering how free it used to be. I know that's quite cliched, but it's like the American dream. You can just do it.
I'm in Texas too, so it's even like multiple steps back from this. You know?
In Florida, I went to Florida and I was watching cars that like would just be in a scrapyard driving around on the road, and I'm like, how are these guys just driving around in these? But if it runs, you can just drive on them.
Have you thrown Drift Masters events like around the, you know, like way outside of your normal range, like in Japan or the United States? And would you like to? Would you like to throw a whole series in the United States?
Look, we've talked about it, and to be honest, I don't think so. I think what we've always said is that drifting is too small a sport, even though it's big to us because we're in it and in the bubble, but I think competition is bad in drifting. I think if you've got a region and you want to do it really well, do that region really well, and then work alongside, you know, Formula Drift or Russian Drift Series or D1 GP, and all kind of stay friendly. Don't try and cross-pollinate, because if you put two championships in one area, you're already splitting your resources, and probably it needs as much resources as possible. So I've never been a big fan of that, and I think with Drift Masters, European Championship, it's always going to be European, because we want to be in that region and do as much as we can there. The more you stretch, the more it gets confusing, and a lot of other championships in the past have stretched themselves so thin that it's not really a championship, it's just a load of events and random drivers, and drivers can't travel. You know, budgets are like whatever about FD, people talk about how expensive it is. It's in the one country. So if you start going to multiple countries, the costs are insane. Hopefully one day we might have a collaboration between, you know, Formula Drift and Drift Masters, D1 GP, and put them all maybe in one event a year with all the best drivers. That's something we've always wanted to do, but we're working towards it. It might be not this year or down the line, but we're super friendly with the guys from FD, from everywhere else. So that's always what I felt, is work as a community rather than competition. So we don't really want to step into anyone else's region. So that's kind of how it's been.
Could you break down for me what the best drift series in the world is? or break down what is the best thing of each one.
That's easier for me to be unbiased. I think, from my perspective, FD has the most professional drivers. So at the top level of FD, I'm talking maybe top 8 to 10. Those guys are proper race drivers. In Europe, you've probably got 2-3 guys on that level. So I think D1GP has the nostalgia of where it came from. I think everyone will always respect Japan because we have to, because that's where it originated from. I think Drift Masters, I think, has the best production. And I know that sounds super biased.
No, I think you guys do.
And I think Formula Drift has probably the most professionalism. And also, in terms of, you got to remember that every US driver is a very good media person, whereas with you 45 countries in Europe, probably one of them is naturally English speaking.
You guys interviewing?
Yeah.
I have a car for you.
You car for me? We're in the middle of an interview.
Okay. I just give it to
You can do a donut or two and then go over there for a minute. You had all day long to be here. Okay, keep going.
We're back. So yeah, FD in terms of, I would say, the drivers being very, very presentable and knowing that media is a huge part of what they do. Driftmaster struggles a little there because a lot of them, English isn't their first language, so they're quite big in their own nation, but when you've got so many nations, it's difficult for them.
I never thought about that.
They have 45, we might have 35 different languages.
Holy cow.
Now, English would be the common language, but it wouldn't be their strongest, so they'll be able to hold a conversation, but to be, pumped up and stuff, it's difficult. Even the Irish struggle with the English language, So that's a little bit of a drawback, but I think, to be honest, everyone's kind of trying their best with what they have. You've got to use the tracks available to you in your region. I think, to be honest, I'm a fan of drifting first and foremost. I've always been a fan more than an organizer or a promoter. I watch everything. I watch D1GP, I watch Formula Drift Japan, I watch everything you guys do and put out. I watch everything just because it's quite nice to see, in general, the community doing good things. I think all that competition and who's better and who's worse is kind of irrelevant. I think the more everyone's just doing better, the better for the sport, because the more it's out there, someone might have no idea what drifting is, but they might stumble across Adam LZ on YouTube. All of a sudden they know what drifting is and they come to an event in Ireland, so it's good for everybody.
What are the next 5 years going to hold for you?
For me, that's a good question. I don't know what the last 5 held, so I'm not sure. Because the funny thing is, I've never had a plan of where we were going. So 10 years ago I started.
Well, how'd you get there then?
It just, a lot of passion, I think, and just wanting to do the jobs probably no one else wanted to do. So I was 27 years of age, I didn't have a job, I didn't have anything, and I was commentating on the Irish Drift Championship. I was a DJ at the time, which is such an aloof job to have. And then they said, oh, you're a good talker and you like cars, you should come and do this drifting thing. Went to one event, hadn't a clue, watched Formula D the night.
What year was that?
2010.
Okay.
So not so long ago, in drifting terms. James Dean was already competing. These guys were already competing at that point. I came and did I was doing a Pro-Am day just to fill the gap for someone else. And they said, oh, you're really good, you should do the Pro Day. And then 2 years later, the guy who owned the championship at the time left to the Middle East. And I said, hey, maybe I'll take over the championship and see if I can run it. No experience, never ran an event in my life before. Went to my dad and said, because the banks wouldn't give me any money because I had no credit score. So I said, can I have 20,000 euro? I'm going to start this business. He was like, this sounds like a stupid business. And then I started the championship. I bought a van, bought some cones, bought some stuff. And then, within 10 months, we were bringing Chris Forsberg and Von Gittin Jr. to Ireland, and we were putting 10,000 people in Mondello Park in Ireland, and it was getting huge. Then I went to Dubai and ran a championship because people, and then at one point Ireland got so good got so good because we were the first national championship in Europe to do live stream that the other championships were like, this is just too hard to compete with. So the guys who won the UK championship said, hey, we'll sell you the UK championship. So at one point I was running, the UK championship, the Irish championship, the European championship, and the Middle East at the same time. And then after,
that's insane.
Which was pretty insane, yeah. And we were doing it pretty good. And then we sort of got burnt out, and we said, look, if we do so much championships, we're probably going to get to a point where we dislike what we're doing because we're doing too much of it. We were event to event to event, and the boys are getting really burnt out. So I said, look, we'll take a step back. We'll just select the things we want to do. So then, after a long period of time, I said we were doing Drift Masters, and while we could do Drift Masters and Nationals, eventually Drift Masters became such a beast, it was really hard to balance it. So I said, hey, why don't we do Drift Masters and focus on that? We still run some events in the Middle East, in the Emirates Drift Championship, and we'll be doing that in a month's time. And then we were doing a lot of cool stuff with our cars behind the scene. Just because we're car guys, we were building drift cars and road cars and whatever. I said, why don't we just film that and see how it goes? And then we lightly did it, but then when the pandemic came, all the events shut down. So Drift Masters shut down, every event was gone. So I was like, right, 80% of my business is now like totally aloof. So I said, why don't we go get a loan from the bank and build some pro drift cars, you know, see what the...
Can I help you with how dumb that idea sounds?
Yep. And I went into an actual bank with that business plan.
And they said yes?
And they said yes. I said, can I have 100...
That guy needs to get fired.
Can I have 100,000 euro to build 2 pro cars, and we're going to build a content plan off the back of it? And he was like, yeah. He sort of looked at it like, well, you've kind of been doing all right so far, and I don't understand whatever it is you do. So he gave us the money. We built a Corvette and MX-5 for Josh, one of the boys, and we filmed the whole thing. And because no one could go anywhere, they were all watching what we were doing, because we were we built a shed from nowhere, just built it in like our friend's yard, put our cars in it, made videos, and we kind of went from like, you know, 15,000 subscribers to like 85,000 subscribers in like a year and a bit. And we just said, oh, now we're doing this. And then of course the pandemic finishes up a little bit, all the events come back on, and we're like, how the hell do we balance doing both? So we're trying now to do the events we love and the content we love, and hope that comes together.
I got distracted for a second.
You're like me, you have ADD like I do.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep on the one train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you adhere to the budget of 2 cars for 150,000?
100,000 was
euros.
the budget. Absolutely not. We went way over it.
How much over? You don't have to tell me exactly.
I think like 20,000 euro maybe.
Oh, that's not that bad.
No, and we were very fortunate that when we started building it, and this is how we ended up on Drift Week.
Is that with a lot of sponsored parts and stuff too?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so it would have cost significantly more if you didn't get free parts.
Yeah.
Or hookups.
Exactly. And what happened along the way, people were watching, and one of the people that watched that series when we were building it was Duarte from the Drift HQ. So he started messaging me like, oh, I love the build, whatever. And I'm like, who is this guy? And we were talking away, and he was like, this guy's really nice. He sent me over parts for the car. Didn't want anything out of it, just said, I'm going to help out. And then he does the deal with Adam, and I'm like, this is crazy. And then I messaged him, and he was doing the rental cars, and then I said, hey, we'll go to Drift Week. So that's how it all came about. But we wanted to come here and just see, we have ideas of certain things that we want to do that are more on the lifestyle, more on the fun side. So the likes of what you do, or what Hoonigan do, or what Adam does, we don't want to do it to that scale, but we want to have a little bit of a look and see.
Scale? You do way more than I do.
No, but like a scale of like, you know, in terms of attention, in terms of like, because even though Drift Week to you might be whatever, because you're in it, from the outside looking in, it's a really big deal. Everyone knows in drifting what it is. Drift
Masters with 48 cameras on it sounds insane.
It doesn't matter.
We have 48 iPhones.
Exactly. You have 48 characters that create their content and put it out there, and we see it. So that's a very important part of it. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's sort of how much interest you get. So you guys get a lot of interest. We wanted to see what you guys were doing. Not to steal the ideas, but just, I always find if you're with inspirational people that are doing things, you'll always get some idea that might not be the same, but you'll pick up pieces as you go. So everywhere I travel, I like to say, what are the people doing right, what are they doing wrong? Would I do something similar? So, you know, that's kind of what we do. We come here for a bit of research.
Going back real quickly, I wish I would have had better ideas 15 years ago, because I've been hosting drift events for almost 20 years now, and I'm frustrated because like Drift Week was something that it wouldn't work without Adam and all the vloggers and all the YouTubing and all this stuff, building it up and all the junk that happened. But I wish I didn't have more rapid good ideas because I created Texas Street Legal, which got rid of like modified cars basically to force my drivers to have reliable cars. And I kept doing things to try and force something I wanted. So like some of the cars would be, like most of these cars here, the E36s are all stock engine, stock injectors, and they just beat on them for weeks, and they're super reliable. Same thing with a lot of the Corvettes or like y'all's E46 M3. That was not a thing in America before. Everyone built cars. So anyways, I tried very carefully to like sculpt something. I'm rambling.
No, but it's a very good point. You're trying to lead it in a direction that you think is sustainable.
And it's frustrating that I don't have more good ideas, because drifting since the beginning has been somebody hosts competitions, you have 3 judges, those judges are arguably good or not good. The drivers do their thing. The drivers get frustrated sometimes they don't. Sometimes everything's great. You host an event in a very static fashion. This is like throwing the book out the window. Yeah. I mean, obviously crazy.
But there's a place...
I wish I had more great ideas.
As I said, it's like you go into a, what you guys would call a convenience store. There's a lot of different drinks. If there was just one, people would be pretty pissed off about it. So you give people options. Some people want to go to FD. Some people want to just rip it at 350Z. Some people want to travel. Some people prefer the social life as much as the drifting part of it. Some people want to make friends. Some people want to challenge their engineering ability. You give something to everybody. Instead of one linear path, everyone's happier. So it's not like one is better than the other. I always find this being really strange conversation for people, because if you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to be an FD and you make it to FD, you make it and you're so happy with that. But you also have other guys that want to spend $10,000 and just drift all day. There's nothing wrong with either. Like, it's personal choice. No one's the same. So I always felt back in the day, it was always so linear. It was like, you start at, practice days, then you go to Pro-Am, then you go to Pro, and then you're fucked because then it gets too expensive and no one can do anything and everyone's complaining. I said, why not just go different paths, So now you're seeing guys making content, making just as much sponsors as guys win an FD, which is brilliant. And then other guys, I'm not really good at talking, might say, I'm just really good at driving, like, I'll go and do that. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think people like you and people like me have just been in those positions where we have to sort of lean people in a direction and make sure that they're happy, because and it's a business to me as it is to you, that the more unhappy people are, the more they won't want to do it anymore and they'll quit and people will just not do it. So you've got to keep giving them options that suits their budget, suits their personality. And I think if you run competitions, then you run a drift week, then you run all these different things, you're just giving people options. And that's what we've tried to do with fun events with drift games, which you can turn up in a €1,000 car and drift 2 days and we'll high five you. And then if you want to spend €200,000 and go do Drift Masters in a stadium, we have something for you as well. So we give people the options.
That's crazy you span that range. That's a lot of like...
It's a very different setup and it's a different stress, but that's the point. It's like everyone's not the same. They shouldn't all have the same... I don't want to be James Dean because I find it would be really stressful for me to try and be that good all the time. But I can talk and I can have fun and I can chat with people, so that's what I want to do. And be mediocre at driving at best, and I'm fine with that. Do you know what I mean? I'm okay. Like, I'm happy to just be pretty good and enjoy it and not have high expectations on me from anybody. And I think that's different.
You jumping into and hosting your own events successfully so rapidly, was that complete random luck, or was it?
I was lucky that I had good people around me that were really passionate about it, and I think I probably overworked myself to the point that it couldn't fail. So I was working 20 hours a day on every event to the finest detail so that it couldn't fail. I literally had everything covered so well because I was so afraid of letting down.
But I mean, were all the spectators coming in organically, or did you have a great spectator base that just showed up from day one?
No, it had just kind of died off a little bit. Maybe they were down to maybe 1,000 or 1,500 spectators an event, and then we brought it to 10,000. But we took big risks. We took a big amount of money and pushed in marketing and brought in international drivers. In hindsight, it was hard to follow. That's what I ended up in my situation. It was such a high level. It was very hard to keep it going like that because people were like, oh, Chris Forsberg's not coming to the next event? What a load of shit. And you're going like, we live in Dublin. It's really hard to get him here. So it got to a point where it peaked. And then when it peaked really was that you only have so much population in Ireland. The country only has 4.5 million people, so there can only be 10,000 people that would be even interested in going to a car event. So that's when I started looking at Europe and the Middle East as like a bit more potential. And then we struck a deal with the guys at Drift Masters for us to come in and partner with them. And that brought they had the structure, but they didn't have the Western approach of media marketing. It was very Polish, very, non-English. So we brought that in and it worked. And it became a good partnership. We're the outward facing thing and they're the inward machine. So I think, I'm a guy who likes to push everything to the limit, sometimes to my own detriment. But I always say I'd hate to leave something saying I didn't give it my best shot. So even if it fails or it wins, I'll push it high.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sure.
Hey, Shannon, we are going to run these cars in a few minutes, or Mark, but just continue holding them. Just tell them they'll get to go, and we do have lighting. I have to keep people happy at the same time. You know how this feels? I have all these people just sitting there in grid, and we're sitting on the thing. But I made it clear what was going on. Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for having us over. Being
you're welcome.
The hospitality here is amazing. To be honest, the bunch of people that I've met and the guys have been telling me, they're so like-minded. I think it's so bizarre that you can bring people from so many different nationalities, sit them all in one pit area, and they talk away because they have a common ground in cars. They have a common ground in probably how stupid it is what we're all doing. So you like meeting other people that are also kind of addicted to it or stupid about it and go, oh, well, we can all justify it because we're all doing it together.
What direction should I take Drift Week as someone from out of the country looking in?
I think you've got a pretty good formula. I mean, I think the one thing maybe that might, I think a lot of people it's difficult to get out of their shell sometimes, because I think a lot of people are quite inward. You know, some people are party animals, some people are quite quiet. So I think the stuff that you've done today, like the games and stuff, that brings a lot of humor to people that, you know, bonds them over that week. And I think, you know, as much as they all want to drive cool stuff, they all want to make new friends. And I think that's what you'll find on these weeks, is that by the end of the last day, people know new people. People are friends for life at the end of it. And I think when all the dust settles, that's really what people want from it, is, you know, new connections, new people. No, they'll travel and meet each other another time down the line. So that's really cool. I think that element of it is the most important thing to protect.
Okay. I have to think about more couches to sleep on when you travel the world.
Pretty much is what people, that's what all drifters have, is friends from different countries that they can sleep on a couch or borrow a car or borrow some parts or go to their garage and fix their car when it's broken. So that, this kind of thing creates that, and it's really nice to see that community. It's very much the same everywhere. Like if you go to Middle East or you go to Europe or here, it's still that kind of nice community of people having fun.
I'm going to rapid fire some questions. Don't get too into them, you know, the answers. How many people does it take to throw an entire Drift Masters event? You already said, I think, 80.
85 on, I would say 100 people probably.
100
depending
people
on the event, but at the
How many
end.
are necessary? All of them?
Yeah, if you want to go to that level, yeah.
How many drivers are necessary to make that series, you know, work?
I mean, it's the drivers aren't the driver entries aren't the clear focus of it, but anywhere from 40 to 55.
Okay, and how many, like, how hard is it to keep the world-class guys in the game in Ireland and Europe and all these things? Are there a constant influx of new people with enough money and sponsors, like, making all this work? Or is it a constant drag where people are constantly falling back out?
Yeah.
You're having to replace them, you're having to replace sponsors, you're having to, like, you know, force it. Is it organically growing, or is it a forced thing?
There's still an element of force. Like, as in, I think there's still an element that the championship helps some drivers, you know, might introduce them to somebody who might be able to help them, and it's the same at every championship, I think. Yeah, it's tough. The budgets go up, the prices go up, the tires go up, the travel goes up, and they're still struggling. And I think a lot of it's still amateur in Europe. Like, there's only probably 3 or 4 drivers in Drift Masters, I would say, are not spending their own money to be there.
Okay. So when you say there's only about 3 or 4 fully sponsored people, is there potential for y'all to run like a real, when I say that, it sounds bad, but, you know, like a real professional thing where the top 32 would all be sponsor-based or something like that?
I think we were getting to that until the pandemic. And then we obviously lost, you know, we only did 3 events in 2 years. So it was difficult for us to build that momentum back up again, but next year I think we will. We'll get back to there. And the viewing figures and the fact that Red Bull are pushing it internationally gives those drivers a great portfolio to say, look, this is like watched by millions of people. And we do see a lot of them getting support from bigger companies. We now have BMW, like the first time ever, they're now sponsoring 2 brand new chassis in the championship.
That's amazing.
And like, they gave them everything they wanted from the main factory to build those programs, and they're developing those cars with the Red Bull Drift Brothers. So we are seeing some drivers, I think, take advantage of the platform, and then some are still learning their media trade, and they kind of went from, I'm super talented in my home country because I just have my own money, and then this is a big step and I'm still on my own money, but I haven't really worked out, do I want to leave my job and become a professional driver, or do I want to just pay for it to do it myself? So a couple of guys still deciding that. I think that'll come, you know, in the next 5 years. I imagine we get up to about 15 and 20 drivers that are fully sponsored, and that's good progress.
How do you, like, control the escalation of the budget in the cars to keep it more equalized in your series? And, like, not equalized as in like the cars so much, but in the budgets, so that people can't get out there?
It's like,
or do you not worry about that?
It's a difficult one. I think drifting limits itself. I think there's only so much power you can put in a car before it doesn't last 2 set of tires in a run. There's only so much a tire can do before it delaminates. I think it's got to that peak level now worldwide where it may have grown so rapidly in 10 years, but now it's at that plateau where you can't do much more, really. It's not going to give you much more advantage. For example, James Dean will come to a Drift Masters event. He's got a van and a trailer and 1 guy, and he's winning the championship.
That's crazy.
And then there's other guys coming with trucks and 20 guys. So right now they still look at him and go, well, if he can win it like that, this might be unnecessary. So he's sort of a self-control.
So you don't really think about this too much, about the escalation of the cost for the drivers?
I would like to.
I just mean you don't have like a clear plan on how to fight it, kind of thing.
I think we've got a tire rule. We've got rules and regulations in the cars that get them to a point where they're all kind of the same.
I think that's how everybody's done it around the world. Is you can only get 2 laps on a set of tires, whatever. But you don't think about like forcing them to get 4 laps or forcing them to get 8, doing something else. And
it overcomplicates it to quite an extent. And I think if and I know this sounds strange, but if you want it to be the best championship in the world, you really need to push the cars, the drivers, and the excitement and the level of builds and stuff. At a Pro-Am level, I completely agree with keeping the budget low. But at the highest level of any motorsport, I mean, they don't stop Mercedes putting in 10 times more money than, Haas in Formula 1. So it's kind of
I know.
much more
I
fair.
just see the escalation of some of this stuff with some racing series, and they price everyone out of it, and then it starts to die.
Yeah,
it escalates very quickly, and then just like crescendos.
The good thing about drifting is
and then
they're putting their own, like, the championship doesn't get more expensive, the travel doesn't get more expensive, but if the driver wants to make it more expensive for himself, I think that's his own decision or her decision.
that's fine.
You know what I mean?
I was just curious.
Yeah, and I think for at the moment we're seeing, like, I think the cars have just got to a level where they kind of just stay there. Like, they haven't really moved in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And I think if it stays like that, then they've already built the cars now, so that's the hard bit done. And they're running back, they're not like building a new car every year, they seem to be just coming back in the same chassis, so they're kind of okay. And the worst thing is then you tell the guy who's just spent all that money, oh no, you have to get a new car now that's much less power. He's like, oh, come on, I've just remortgaged my house on this car, and now it's not legal.
That's terrifying if someone's mortgaging their house on their car.
I've heard of it happening, yeah. And that's, again, it's a personal decision. It's not something we can't be their mom and dad. Like, it's up to them. If they want to chase the dream, I wouldn't do it. I'd wait till I had the sponsorship to do it, but some people do it. And again, if you're looking at the entire population of Europe.
You didn't wait for the sponsorship. You went out and got a €100,000 loan.
Yeah, and I gambled it on it, and luckily
it worked.
It worked, yeah. But I think that was how I had to do it.
That's ballsy, by the way.
Yeah, but I had no option. I was losing anyway. I was going to lose my business in 3 or 4 months if I didn't do something. So I said,
really?
Well, yeah. So I was like, what's the
Man, you take crazy risks.
I can, because I'm 37 years of age, I'm not married, and I have no kids.
Yeah.
I have a great girlfriend, and we have a house and a mortgage. But I have had to put some of those things on hold because I don't want my risks to affect anybody else at the moment until I'm stabilizing it. And luckily, they've paid off for me. But that is a very risky thing to do. I'm not sure I would recommend it to a lot of people. But I think if you're so in the deep, you just see the best of yourself.
Has it gone wrong, by the way? Have you lost big at any of this stuff?
Yeah, I lost quite a bit with some deals I made in the early days that I thought this was quite a small thing. So I would do deals with people and rights deals and copyright deals, and eventually I would grow it to a massive amount that they were getting a huge amount of money off me when I never really planned that. So there was some deals, but that was almost a learning curve. You learn as you go for the next deal that you don't do that, So I've had some bad times, but I think also at the same time, like, we'll kind of go into the office and say, we are so fucked right now, we need to get out of this in 2 months. And then you see people just come up to another level, and you don't get that complacency of like, oh, everything's fine. Like, as me and Josh would say, we're so used to being fucked that it's normal. Like, we wake up every day and go, how much debt are we in, rather than are we in debt? So I'm like, we keep surviving that way. And look,
that's crazy.
It's it keeps us on our toes. But I think you have to take those risks if you want to. Everyone would do it, right? If you couldn't, if you could.
All right, my very last thought is, when I go to Japan, the professional drivers over there, they'll ask me things like, I brought over Yokoi and Tezuka, and I bring over like drivers from around the world and stuff, or the United States professional guys, and they come drive at my events, kind of like you brought over people. Yeah. And a lot of the Japanese people specifically would be like, how do I get to drive in America? How do I do this? This is gonna be my big break, because my own Japanese culture does not support drifting commercially in the same way as like the American market does, and they think the American market is like the golden market to like escape out to for sponsorship and for everything else and for all the money. Because I hear D1 guys, most of them still buy their own tires.
That's crazy.
And like in America, Pro-Am guys like Fielding, just dudes that come to my events have sponsors.
Yeah.
And that's like blows their mind.
Well, we're a very I mean, the Japanese guys only care about Japan. They don't really have like an outward look.
Yeah, but I was going to say, how is that about Europe? So
we've had conversations with Japanese drivers that want to do it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
And
my question is how is it with sponsorship in Europe? Are you guys completely satisfied with staying European? Are you guys have enough sponsorship to support yourself?
Yeah.
Because you say there's only 3 to 4 professional guys. That kind of sounds like Japan.
The reason it's at that level at the moment is because it's still quite new. I mean, Drift Masters, as much as it seems like this crazy big thing, this is our, we've done 5 years, and 2 of them have been through the pandemic. So we've done 3 years.
Okay.
And of that, we've only done 2 with Red Bull. So we're still quite young in what we're trying to do. I mean, there's not 10, 15 years behind it. So that consistency is going to take time. And what you need is a consistent championship so sponsors are confident to put the money in. At the moment, it's like we were getting there, and then the pandemic was like, oh, the events are cancelled, and all the sponsors just took it all back in and said, we're not spending anything because we don't know what's happening, and they've given money out and the event didn't happen. So I think it's going to get there. I think naturally, I think Europe is an untapped market. I mean, if you think of US drifting, it's been quite high level for 10, 15 years. We haven't had companies in Europe really invest in that much, so they're still young. There's a lot of companies we've talked to and said, we're really into this, we want to push quite a few, bit of money into it. And I think it needs a little stability at the moment, but we'll get there. Like, it's just still young. I think it's still 10 years behind the US.
One quick thing. Yeah. Do you think that your championship right now, Drift Masters, per event spends more than Formula D?
Yeah.
With how much, like double?
Oh.
Triple?
I don't know all those figures.
Okay, but I was going to say, it looks like you guys spend significantly more. So my question is, it seems like you guys already have more sponsorship money, but it looks like it's almost all coming from Red Bull in a huge amount. Not all, but you know what I mean, like a significant amount.
Drift Masters is owned by Budmat, who's also Worthhouse. So they have a business that is a very big business. So this is very much a passion project for them. So profitability straight from the off isn't their goal. They look at things as long-term investments. Me, you, don't have that time or money to wait for that to come back, but big companies do. So I know that, Jim and Ryan in Formula D, they are the most consistent championship because they treat it like a really good business. They make their money. Now, I wouldn't imagine a huge amount, but it's consistent. They get paid. Everyone gets paid. Everyone goes home. It's really, whereas Drift Masters sort of roll the dice, gamble it out there, a little bit like I am, and then they go, and then it has paid off. But they've had the luxury of having financial backing to be able to do it, and also they had the luxury of hiring a lot of very talented people to put it together that aren't cheap. So because they did it to that standard, Red Bull were attracted already because it was a bolt-on product for them. They didn't need to come in and change everything and invest money in the championship. They just needed to show it to more people.
Why is Red Bull interested in European drifting and not the United States drifting?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is that they're extreme sports. They like drifting a lot. Europe is a market for them that they see drifting being very varied. And also remember, if you're involved with Drift Masters, you've got 45 countries represented. You've got about the whole of Europe watching it, which is a lot of different countries. And then in the US, you've just one country, which is a big country and a very important one. But there's also not as much, I would say, competition in Europe between so many energy drink sponsors, so many everything, that Red Bull came in and said, we like this product, we want to show it to more people around the world, we want to package it, we want to make it very professional. And it's been very successful for them. In fact, whether I should say this or not, they also own WRC Rally, and drifting is almost as popular now as rallying in Europe, which is crazy for us.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're seeing great return for what they're putting in, and they don't have to have helicopters chasing cars over deserts, which is what WRC costs.
Do you think the Red Bull thing will continue for like another 5-10 years, or do you think it's like always terrifyingly? You probably can't say, I guess.
I can't say, no.
Yeah.
I'll just have to say there is a long-term agreement.
Okay, cool. And so you don't have to worry about it and be so stressed out.
No.
Seems like if they're involved and Budmat's involved, you really are pretty stable and you don't have to worry about
it is? I'll put it this way.
Metrics.
I had a lot of good ideas and a lot of enthusiastic things that I want to do for drifting. I just didn't have the budget and I didn't have the means. And those guys had the confidence to come to me and say, you've got really good ideas. I don't know how you've made these small countries really financially viable and made, really big series out of it, small countries. So when I came to them, I partnered up. I mean, I'm vice president, so I'm not the owner. I'm not the guy who makes all the final decisions, but they listen to my ideas. They've been very helpful, and we've been so happy with that partnership for the last 5 years. It's like a really good bunch of people trying to push it forward. So I'm a little bit freer to be just working hard on making it better and not stressing out so much about the financials all the time.
Okay. Well, is there anything you want to end with? I think we're done.
I just want to say thank you very much for having us. We've had an awesome time. I've only had a day and a half, and it's probably one of the best 48 hours I've had in a long time. So I've had an awesome time, and hopefully I can get back on the next Drift Week. And if anybody's watching this, they want to subscribe to Drift Games and come and watch what we do in Ireland and how we do it, and travel to Drift Masters and hopefully get back to Drift Week again.
They have a much higher quality, whole production. They'd have a B camera here.
probably.
They'd have a B and a C
We don't know
camera.
how to do things like really simple. It's to our detriment.
Yeah. Well, you do it really, really well. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so
I
much.
love your content.
Thank you.
So I enjoy it. Please keep making it. And man, it blows me away when I watch the Driftmaster stuff.
And now we have to get off this because there's about 20 cars over there that want to go drift here.
Let's get out of here.
I feel bad for holding them up.
It's okay.
I want to say thank you to Dave for doing this interview. I really love doing this interview. I really highly respect everything this guy does. He is super influential in drifting. Thank you so much. And you know who else is influential in drifting? BC Racing Custom Coilovers. They have done so much for the grassroots community. You hear me talk about them all the time. Go hit them up if you need coilovers. Thank you to whatmonstersdo.com. Go to their website, order some merch, discount code EBISU for 20% off, EBISU. Go to Y Plate Imports if you need to get a Japanese right-hand drive car, such as a JZX100. That's something they specialize in right now. Thank you so much to them. And thank you to ECU Master, who drives in my series, comes to Drift Week, and they also happen to have James Dean as one of their sponsored drivers. And thank you to NK Wheels. They make the NK RPF1 that I've been running for more than a decade. I love them. And thank you to Drift HQ for bringing out that van that keeps all the cars on Drift Week going. And it's not a van anymore, it's a trailer. And congratulations to everything you guys are doing, Drift HQ. You're awesome. Thank you.